All right, so welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar here today. So my name is Caitlin Frentz, and I am the manager of K-16 partnerships here at FEND, Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development. I am here with my colleague Hillary Kane.
Hello, everyone.
We are going to do a quick intro about us and what we do. Thank you. You can flip to that slide, Tori, that's fine. And then just to give a heads up for folks who may not be as familiar with FEND, but we are a consortium of higher eds in the Philadelphia region. We're based at the University of Pennsylvania, but work with about 25 or so campuses broadly in the area of community partnerships, civic engagement, service learning, and I specifically then do more of our education focus K-12 partnerships with schools, and it has been a lot of focus on college access. And over time, we have then led us to a conversation on what happens when those students go to our college campuses and that college success conversation. Well, we do a lot of other work. We are kind of a hub of networking. A lot of us know us for our FEND Update newsletter, which if you do not get now, you will get next Tuesday, which is a lot of useful information and jobs and grants and upcoming events. We run a lot of events ourselves, including one that is,
sorry,
that's okay. One that's coming up next week on increasing teacher diversity on January 28th, 2 weeks from now. Not trying to rush that anymore, any more than it needs to be. We also run a bunch of other programs, including some AmeriCorps programs, like Next Steps for current college students, which is a college retention focus. We are a partner with the School District of Philadelphia on Gear Up, a large college readiness grant. We have a FEND Fellows Vista project where we have Vistas who are serving as community partnership coordinators in Philadelphia schools or are working in capacity building projects in nonprofits in the region. And then increasingly we are in the space of college success and engaging stakeholders, partners, and our campuses in conversations around how to support first generation students from Philadelphia and obtaining a college degree. So you can do the next slide. All right, so a little kind of background on that. We have engaged now a little over a year and a half ago. We had a large meeting with about 30 campuses. About 70 different folks represented in various different positions, everywhere from institutional research to missions to student life, inclusion and diversity, all kind of coming together and who either tangentially or directly influence the success of students on campus. And we then kind of focused on 4 questions. So Troy, you can click next. I think it comes up. Yes. So we had thinking about 4 different areas that impact student success on campuses. One being high impact practices and instruction. So how do we support students who might be unprepared? How do we think about what's going on in classroom, conversations about pedagogy, conversations about faculty training. The second bucket area being looking at financial and social support. So how do we support students with the out of classroom challenges, connecting issues of transportation, housing security, food insecurity, etc. Supportive in culture and climate on campus. So how do we ensure that our campus is welcoming and inclusive? And then lastly, looking at data. How do we know who are these students? How are we having these conversations across campus? How are we sharing this information? And how can that inform our practices? And so what we have been doing for the past year is having webinars that are focused around these various different areas that are influencing college success. and as a time to kind of showcase what folks are doing, share some ideas on best practices, and hopefully generate further conversations and how we can collaborate more toward this larger goal. All right, we can do the next slide. Awesome. So this is just an example of the webinars that we've had in the past on the different topic areas. And so our goal, this is our first webinar for 2020. And then our goal is to continue to have webinars in each of these other areas throughout the year. And we'll make sure that all of the information on the upcoming webinars will be posted in our College Success newsletter. And we'll make sure that everybody here is on that list. If anybody who is participating today, if you know of any interesting folks on your campus or partner organizations that you work with that have great, awesome things to share, we're always looking to kind of, find out what's new and happening, and let us know. We can, think about setting up a future webinar.
And if you want recordings of any of these previous webinars, we have those as well.
I have a tiny URL link on the slide, but we will also send out notes and links and recording and slides from this for everybody that's on today and registered as well. And I'll make sure that I get the link for the other webinars that we hosted as well. And then I think there's one more slide, Tori. There we go. So other things that we're doing with the Success Network is, I alluded to, we have a monthly newsletter that comes out that includes various other different maybe events that are in webinars that are useful, resources. I also have been trying to kind of keep a section of news articles, maybe podcasts, or other kind of noteworthy items, as this becomes a more elevated conversation in our area of work. And so, again, if you have things that you would like to share out in that, feel free to send them my way. And then I have a note over here that as kind of a heads up to folks, we are looking to build out an additional part of our network in developing small learning communities. We're still kind of engaging in conversations on what this would look like, but our hope is that as we continue in this work, we would kind of delve deeper onto a select few campuses in a way that brings together folks for deeper conversations on institutional transformation and how, not only can we elevate this conversation collectively, but then on our individual campuses to really kind of engage in some deep, meaningful work. So keep an eye out for that, and hopefully we can work more closely with some of you all in the future. On that note, part of working and building relationships is getting to know everybody who is part of a network. And so I think in that spirit and that vein, we're just going to do, if folks want to unmute themselves, and we'll try to see if we can do this in an organized manner. I might call people out to introduce yourself and then what organization or institution you are from. So I am going to call out, and hopefully we can do this in an organized manner. So we have Chessie, who might have just signed on. You want to introduce yourself? All right, I'm working on trying to manage this. Let's try Ellie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ellie Esmond from Bryn Mawr College, and I'm here with
Lisa Armstrong.
Also at Bryn Mawr College. We're in the Center for Career and Civic Engagement.
All right, great, thank you. Let's see, Kameta, if I'm saying that correctly. You can unmute yourself too. Oops, unless I muted you. All right, Camilla, I think you're unmuted.
Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my name is Kamita, and I'm Kamita Straker. I'm the coordinator for student success at Penn State Brandywine, and also the retention specialist on campus.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Lauren?
Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Lauren.
Hi, my name is Lauren Ward, and I work at the Center for Access, Success, and Achievement at Villanova University.
Great. Sarah Olson?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. My name is Sarah Olson, and I am the Director of Dining and Auxiliary Services at Drexel.
Great, welcome.
Thank you. Shonda?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. I work also at the Center for Access, Success, and Achievement at Villanova University. I'm a graduate assistant.
Thank you, welcome. Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan, you might have muted yourself.
Yes.
Can you unmute Nicole or whoever, and Walker?
Did you say Nicole?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Nicole Davis. I'm the Associate Director for Outreach and Retention in the Center for Access, Success, and Achievement at Villanova University. Nathan actually stepped out for a second. That's why you didn't hear him.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Clearly,
Okay.
the house.
Yes. And is that Nicole Walker?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Natalie Walker Brown. I'm in
Yes. Sorry.
St. Joe's University.
Thank you. Awesome. Thanks for joining. Is there anybody that I missed or had awkward moments muting, unmuting? You can unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Chessie.
Okay.
I missed you. Yeah, I missed you earlier. I am also a graduate assistant at the Center for Access, Success, and Achievement at Villanova University.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I think that's it for everybody that's on here. So if you just make sure you are not talking where you muted yourself. And now I am going to stop talking and hand it over to Tori, who is our speaker today, and let her talk about all the wonderful things they're doing at Westchester. So Tori, you now have the ball.
Wonderful. Can you hear me still?
Yes, you're good.
Fantastic. So hi, everyone. My name is Tori Nuccio. I've been at Westchester University for 8 years, and I worked in enrollment management at Arcadia University for about 4 years before that. My job description is Interim Associate Director of Financial Aid. And then recently, back in 2016, we extended that to include single point of contact for homeless and foster students after I developed a couple different initiatives on campus, one of which we're going to focus on today, which is the Westchester University Promise Program. The other one I'll touch on but not dive into as deeply, which is the Westchester University Resource Pantry, but feel free to let me know if you have additional questions about that program. So the Promise program focuses on supporting unaccompanied homeless youth and foster students. We started providing services to students, primarily housing. In 2013, we had a few students who actually did come forward and say, hey, you know, winter break is coming up and I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. And at that point, that population was pretty new to me, even though I had been working in financial aid for quite a few years at that point. So I reached out to housing, started a mini version of the advisory committee I'm going to tell you about today. And we decided to offer those few students housing throughout the year. And after doing that, we started to ask ourselves, well, there's probably more we can do for those students, and there's probably more students that qualify for that assistance. So for those of you who are not familiar with Westchester, although I have a feeling everyone is based on the list of colleges I heard today, we are one of the PASHE institutions, so we are state funded, and we have about 17,000 students on campus, and about 14,000 of those are undergraduate students. I actually work with the federal Pell Grant, so I can confirm for you that 25% of our undergraduate population is Pell eligible. So we're still a pretty high access institution, serving a good amount of low income first generation students. From there, I actually connected with the Field Center at University of Pennsylvania that focuses on children policy. They have a foster care to college work group. It continues to do this work to this day. Their next meeting is on the 28th. If anyone's interested, you can reach out to Sarah Wash if you're starting to do work in this capacity. And through them, they actually received a grant with the Philadelphia Foundation to start creating cohorts of campuses who want to create college support programs for foster youth in particular. They wrote to me right away and said, you know, Tori, we know you're doing this for homeless students. Would you be willing to expand it to foster youth? And I said, probably what everybody's thinking right now. It's not really a question of what I want. It's a question of what university leadership is going to support. So after meeting with several people on campus, I did gain enough support from the president's office, the provost's office, and the Office of Advancement to confirm, yes, we can expand what we're doing to foster youth and try to establish a campus support program. So that officially started in 2016, and the Promise program was named by one of the students we were serving. Actually, it was one of the students that we first served all the way back in 2013. And then in 2019, we were excited to find out that one of the faculty members on campus requested that the Promise program be added to the strategic plan as one of the goals for the university to help support. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in this presentation. So again, the Promise program looks to support our foster youth on campus, and then we use the McKinney-Vento, which is a federal law that speaks to unaccompanied homeless youth, to define who our students are that qualify for the unaccompanied homeless youth determination, and those are students without parents who are lacking adequate fixed nighttime residence and are under the age of 24, which falls in line with FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Also considers students 24 and older as independent students automatically, where students who have the unaccompanied homeless youth determination can override that in the ages of 18 to 24. So they don't need parent information on their FAFSA. And then this year, what we're working on as part of the strategic plan initiative is trying to expand our services to students who are accompanied and homeless. So we've had cases before where students are unfortunately homeless with their parents, whether they're living in a doubled up situation, so the family lost their home and is now living with a friend of the family or relative, or we've even had a case where the whole family was staying at a shelter or transitional housing. And technically before that would not qualify for the Promise program, since we're looking for the students who do not have an adult advocate, and now we're trying to expand our services to include that population as well. So in order for students to participate in the Promise program, they do have to complete an annual intake form. That intake form collects some demographic information that they're not required to report to the university since they don't have parents on their federal application or on their admissions application. It pretty much gives me some emergency contact or best people to call if there is something that I need to make aware to another advocate besides the student, or if the student goes missing and we really need to get a hold of that student. So they provide that information. It also gives us permission to share their information with other offices affiliated with the Promise program. So they sign off to let me release their name to housing, most importantly, counseling services, the tutoring center, and most recently, student health. And that's because those offices are providing prioritized and specialized services to this population. But in order to make sure that they are not charging them over breaks, which we'll talk about a little bit more, or charging them for counseling sessions. They need to know who they are to flag them in their own internal systems. So that's another reason why we have them sign off on the intake form annually. And then also it asks them, you know, are there certain services that you're looking to receive this year? And I would say 9 out of 10 mark tutoring, as well as housing, but then there's also things on there like peer-to-peer support and mentorship, extracurricular activities or field trips, because when our students stay over break, campus kind of quiets down a bit and unfortunately is not the most active and vibrant environment. So we want to know, you know, how many students are actually going to be around if we wanted to plan barbecues or trips somewhere. So we try to collect all that information up front to help us plan for the year. We also decided last year that we need to require active participation in the program, whether that be a one-on-one meeting with myself or my intern, or just coming to the monthly event that we hold, which is a dinner or lunch. So they can choose either or. They can either come to a group setting and hear from their peers as well as me, or they can just come sit down and say, hey, this is what's going on. No, I don't need anything. Yes, I do remember that the ad drop period ends at that point. Just so, you know, if something does come up, I don't find out about it 2 months after the fact, which is, you know, a lesson learned while working with this population. We do identify students a few different ways. There's a couple different pathways to this determination. One that's been coming up a few times is students will mention it in their admissions essay. So when they're speaking of the hardships themselves or their families have faced, the admissions counselor will flag it and forward me the information. And they won't tell me what's in the essay, but they'll say, you know, here's a student that we think might qualify for the Promise program. Can you reach out to them, tell them a little bit about the program, and invite them to participate? And then campus-wide, since we've done presentations for our executive council, our faculty union, as well as our student affairs leadership meeting, we have a referral system. So if a faculty hears something in class as to why an assignment wasn't done, a counselor hears something, then they send an email to the student with me copied and just introduce me as a resource without disclosing any information about what they learned. And then since I work in financial aid, obviously the main source that I use is the FAFSA itself, but in 2 different ways. There are questions on the FAFSA that ask students if they were in foster care or they believe they qualify to be unaccompanied homeless youth. What I'm learning is that not many students who qualify to be unaccompanied homeless youth will actually understand that question and mark it as yes. And when they don't do that and they do not provide parent information, their application for financial aid rejects. And we actually cannot award financial aid on that application. So what I do is I send an email out to all of our rejected FAFSA forms and say, you know, we see that your application is incomplete and you were not able to receive financial aid at this moment. Is there something that we can do in order to help you resolve the issues you had with your FAFSA form, or, you know, get it to a complete status? Most students will say, you know, oh, you know, my parents were in the room at the time, so they didn't provide their information, or I clicked submit too soon without updating all the signature fields. But then there are always those rare cases where I have students write back to me and say, you know, I really don't know how to complete this form. I have no parents in my life. I am staying with, you know, my high school best friend's parents, but I don't think I should put them on. And from those conversations, financial aid administrators actually have the authority to make an unaccompanied homeless youth determination and override that FAFSA status, so then we can offer financial aid. And then the resource pantry provides free food, winter attire, business attire, toiletries, and school supplies to any and everyone on campus. There is no qualifier. There is an intake, but it's not limited to certain populations right now. However, we've learned that many students who need the resource pantry tend to need other services as well. So I do also receive referrals from the resource pantry. Okay, so what is the Promise program really? The Promise program is a campus support program that tries to do the heavy lifting for the students so they don't have to run around campus and identify what gaps they might have in service or need, because they really are their own advocate and usually they're first generation new to the entire college process. So one is providing year-round mentorship. We have both monthly dinners and lunches, as I mentioned, and those are run by either myself or my graduate intern. They usually have one topic that we're focusing on or trying to focus on, but it usually ends up like any family dinner getting taken over by venting or things that we're excited about. And that's really what it was built to do, is replace that dynamic, not having the ability to go home on the weekends and just tell somebody about everything that's going on in your life, whether it's good or bad. So this is an opportunity to do that in a peer-to-peer setting. We also have an orientation program that we run specifically for Promise programs. So we offer them either a student who's currently in the Promise program or an intern to act as their parent for the day, because as of right now, our orientation program is built so half of the program is directed to students and the other half is directed to families. Unfortunately, the students who qualify for the Promise program usually do attend on their own. And in order to make sure that they are not missing any information or don't, receive the same pamphlets that everyone else does, we do offer for somebody to represent them as their family. And then at the end of the day, we actually host our own orientation program where we have a special lunch and we give out bedding and backpacks to help them move into their room and make sure they're stocked with those classic essentials that you would need to start your college life with. And then we also partner with our tutoring center. So students who indicate on the intake form that they're interested in tutoring automatically get shared with the tutoring center. So they do outreach to the students to say, hey, we see your schedule is this. Do you know which specific course you want assistance with? But then if they did not provide that on their intake form, they do still get a invitation at the beginning of the semester to sign up for a tutor before our campus-wide sign-up day, because there are long lines and unfortunately there are wait lists in our tutoring center, so I really can't afford for these students to end up on a wait list. And then I actually manage the work study program on campus, so it's very easy for me to offer priority placement and work study jobs since I am the keeper of all of the job openings. So when one of my students tell me they want a job, I can tell them right away what's available, and if they want one of those, I make sure it's offered to them first. We have two different types of housing on campus. We have traditional housing that's owned by the university, and then we have affiliated housing that's private housing. Both have offered the students year-round housing. It's just structured a little differently because one requires a lease and one does not. Most students choose to stay in our traditional housing, which is actually our more affordable housing on campus in your classic cinder block room. And that's really because they usually don't have to move. If you pick university student housing, it's very unlikely that you can stay in the same room throughout the year. Where if you pick traditional housing, housing will work with me to make sure that what you're placed in the fall is the same room you can stay in over winter, over spring break, and over summer term, which is a big deal to this population because moving is not easy. I actually got a new car a couple years ago, and when my husband asked, do you have any idea what you want? I said an SUV, because moving this population in a Chevy Cobalt is not an easy task, even if it's only a couple blocks away, because my students bring all of their possessions, not just a select few bags that they want to put in their dorm room. We also do have scholarship money. So the Promise program is fully funded by donors and foundations, but the majority of the requests that we put in is for academic scholarships. So that helps either cover any gaps that come up on your fall and spring semester bills, or offer you the opportunity to take winter or summer courses. That's important to us because a lot of our students think, hey, if I'm already going to be on campus, why not take advantage of the opportunity to either get ahead or possibly make up something I didn't do so well in. So we do our best to pay for those courses. We also do tap into that account for emergency funding. We recently had a student apply for $6,000 in study abroad support, but I had to pull together a few different offices to help fund that because that's quite the ask. But we did get it all together. So if she does decide to go, she is all set to pay for that trip. And then meal plan scholarships that were actually provided through our bookstore is a separate entity through I actually forget what it stands for, but it's SSI, and they donated funding that's specifically to support students who are in the Promise Program and Resource Pantry with meal plan scholarships. And that's important because our students who live with us 365 days a year, they're charged like any other student for the fall and spring semester, those standard academic terms, but they are not charged for winter break, spring break, and summer break. However, although we were able to waive housing charges because we have a contract with Aramark on campus, we were not able to waive dining fees. So we use those meal plan scholarships to pay for their meal plans throughout the year, including the break semesters when they're staying on campus, what's supposed to be for free. So that helps to fund that priority. And then I did mention we do have priority intake at our counseling center. That is also because unfortunately our counseling center sees wait lists. But since my students are usually dealing with a level of trauma other students on campus typically have not seen, I can usually get them bumped in there pretty quickly, and then they will actually help me find either pro bono off-campus support or off-campus support that's in walking distance that might have a small fee like $50 a session that again I can tap into and pay for with emergency funds from the Promise Program account. We also do holidays together because we do our best to act as a family whenever family comes up in the calendar. So we do have Thanksgiving together. We did a 4th of July barbecue event. Our biggest event of the year is actually Christmas, because at this point, every student that we've met in the program has said that they either don't celebrate the holidays because they've never had somebody to celebrate with, or they do celebrate Christmas. So we have a dorm lounge turned into a Christmas party with 2 big Christmas trees. Our football coach and student affairs team helps us raise funds as well as new items that the students have asked for and wrap them up as Christmas gifts. This year was actually a pretty big year. Each student unwrapped about 10 different things, so they did better than my 1-year-old daughter, which is probably for the best because she won't remember anything. And then they get stockings full of gift cards that usually are focused on things like Wawa for gas, grocery stores for food, Amazon for books, and those usually range, $200 to $300 a student. So it's a pretty big event. I know our students get pretty excited for it throughout the year. And then since it usually receives publicity, this is usually the time of year that I have students asking how they can be part of the Promise Program because they think it's a club. So I have some interesting conversations in the next couple weeks ahead of me. And then we do collaborative programming events with our resource pantry that's focused on using our campus gardens for produce throughout the year. And then our career center will help with mock interviews and resume writing. And then I actually manage our financial literacy program on campus, which is called WCU FinLit. So we focus on managing your credit, creating a budget, managing any student loan debt you may have, and how to, prepare for repayment one day. We also last year started partnering with our distance education office. They had a certain number of laptops and tablets available for students to borrow who were in online programs. We asked if a certain number of those could be reserved for our program, and last semester we were able to have 2 laptops given to our students with no computers to help with their homework. And luckily, it does not require them to be in an online course. It's just supporting those who do not have access to their own technology. And then we've had many different restaurants and local companies reach out to me about creating internships for these students. So we always share that information. Most recently, I got asked to share with the students that they're looking for people to take census information in the Westchester community, and they're offering $14 an hour. So that flyer was left on my desk on Monday. And then, of course, we have an end of the year celebration because what we find is not all students do want to stay over break. A lot of them are coming from doubled up situations that they've been in for, a few to 5 or 10 years now. So they're almost more comfortable in their doubled up situation than trying to stay on campus throughout the year. So we still want to celebrate our whole group before we break for the semester. And then we did have our very first field trip in December. We took the students to Longwood Gardens. One of their active board members actually donated tickets to our housing office. So our housing office actually took the lead on taking the students to Longwood Gardens right before Christmas. And then we're working with the strategic plan committee to get SEPTA passes and create an Uber account, because I actually learned from our last field center meeting, the foster care to college work group, that you can create an Uber account where the student can put in the trip that they want to make, and then the creator of the account can approve for it and pay for it. So we're going to try piloting that hopefully this semester, but if not this semester, then next semester. Okay, so you're probably thinking, how in the world can you pay for this and do all of this? We're pretty lucky / blessed. We've had some significant support, not only from Westchester alumni who saw the work that we were doing featured in one of our magazine articles, in the Philadelphia Inquirer. We were on Fox 29 News, we've been in the Washington Post. And when that happens, when we end up in a media outlet, I usually see a significant increase in donations to our foundation account. So if there is any positive work going on your campuses, I honestly feel the best thing you can do to gain monetary support is to make sure that information is shared with your communications and advancement offices, because they are huge advocates for knowing anything and everything that we're doing, so they can share that with the community. We've also had a couple foundations give pretty sizable gifts for long-term support. So we created a budget based on how much we spent in the last year for so many students. And then each year the program's been in existence, we've seen growth. In 15-16, we were just shy of 30 students. This year we're at 47 students. And based on what I'm hearing from admissions thus far, we will definitely be well into the 50s next year. So seeing that continuous growth made me put out some long-term projections to a couple foundations that our foundation, the Westchester University Foundation, has worked with in the past. Also, the strategic plan does have a financial element and some incentive funding that can be applied for, so we've used that as well. The holidays is usually when we see a good amount of donations from individuals, whether it be current students, current parents, alumni, staff, faculty. I posted about our holiday party on my own personal Facebook page, and just that day raised $600 for the fund. What's not on here, because it's pretty recent, was our music department also offered to do a benefit concert for the Promise program. So although they were not selling tickets that evening, they did sell t-shirts and mugs and food, as well as gave out donation cards to all who were attending. So that also raised a pretty nice chunk of funds in one evening. So just, trying to collaborate with things that are already going on campus to share needs has continuously helped me support all the things we want to do. And then with our affiliated housing, they do require a lease with a guarantor, which is pretty much a cosigner. And in the past couple of years, they have agreed to waive that guarantor as long as I guarantee up front that I will make sure that the full housing bill is paid, as well as making sure those students are not charged over the summer term. So that has also been a little bit more challenging than your traditional housing options on campus. I mean, overall, I know we're blessed to even have housing on campus, because it's a little harder for me to talk about these types of programs with community colleges. But it is nice to see both our private housing and our university-owned housing offering the same services. We also have an advisory committee, which I relied on heavily when trying to put this program together. So initially, it was only campus constituents. Our admissions office, the resource pantry actually didn't initially exist when we were working on this, but housing, tutoring. Our academic success program is our bridge program for admissions. So students who are not automatically admitted due to their SAT scores who have to come for 6 credits over the summer. We do see quite a few Promise Program students go through that admissions model. So we wanted to make sure that that team was represented, as well as counseling and government relations, because they help me stay on top of legislation such as the Fostering Independence Waiver that was passed this year in Pennsylvania, that requires all universities to have a single point of contact for foster youth and provides a last dollar tuition and fees waiver to foster youth. So for those of you who are not familiar with that, feel free to let me know if you have any questions about that, because I know we are supposed to be implementing this by fall 2020. I will share that I have some outstanding questions that I'm still working on myself with the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. But I do feel I'm a little bit ahead of the curve from some other institutions who haven't been working with this population. So back in 2018, I announced to the campus that I was pregnant, and most people were excited, but some were terrified of what's going to happen to the Promise students when you go on maternity leave. So our foundation actually wrote to one of our alumni and let them know that I was going on maternity leave, and they helped fund an internship for graduate students. So that is how me taking on interns started. Katia was actually hired 4 days before I went into labor. So talk about baptism by fire. She really had to jump in on her own, and she did a fantastic job. And now the students are more than comfortable with meeting with Katia in my place, or sometimes write to Katia and not me, because they know, this is Katia's only job, where Tori's balancing a few other things in her email. So she only works 10 hours a week, but in those 10 hours, most of her time is dedicated to counseling. Other times it's dedicated to planning for programs. This year, we're also adding a second intern again. We had one before who helped with academic support, because he was actually an expert from the tutoring center that worked with both academic advising and tutoring. So he was doing some different types of projects to get our students back in good academic standing. This year, we're replacing that position with somebody who can work on data, because for me to apply for quite a few grants that go across my table, I really need to start sharing some concrete data. And as of right now, that is, would you like to look at Tori's spreadsheets and hope that they're still accurate? So we just built an indicator in our system to privately mark whether or not the students have participated in this program, which will allow me to work with institutional research to gather some data. And our new grad intern is going to help me with marking those students and gathering some of that information. And that is all I have put together today, but I definitely have in the past experienced quite a few questions around this program, so I wanted to make sure I left time for questions today.
Thank you very much, Tori. And we will open it up for questions. I actually have a few myself just to kind of start us off. I noticed that your graduate interns were HEPSA.
Oh, I apologize. I really should have spelled that out. So that's our Higher Education Policy and Student Affairs program.
Okay. Nice. Just interested in like what kind of graduate students would be interested in that kind of work, and so that's really helpful.
Yeah. Most of the students who've worked in the resource pantry have been either from that program or our social work program as well.
That makes sense. The other question I had was, have you encountered any kind of like stigmatization or any way that students feel like they're negatively like identified as being part of this? And if you have, what are some things maybe that you've done to kind of destigmatize that?
So we see all sorts of reaction to participating in this program, which is one of the main reasons why we offered both either one-on-one meetings or dinners. We have students who, if I made Promise Program t-shirts and patches, they would proudly wear it around campus and scream, "I'm a Promise Program student." And then we have students who have never attended a dinner, do not come to the holiday party even though they're on campus. Just do not feel comfortable letting their peers or anyone know that they're participating in this program. And honestly, I mean, that has a lot to do with natural introvert versus extrovert, but also, you know, I completely understand that because the Promise program only services, you know, students in these very serious situations, that unfortunately that does come with a level of stigma. We do our best not to advertise things across campus. It's actually recommended by the National Association of Educating Homeless Children and Youth, NACY, who I'm affiliated with, to hang flyers throughout your institution. But when I actually printed a copy of the flyer that they created it and showed it at one of my dinners, I had more students bothered by that idea than not, because their fear was, well, then everyone's just going to try to be homeless because they're going to say that losing their home is, you know, the best way through college because you pay for everything. And it's just, and I have had a couple cases where students have tried to be in the Promise program but do not qualify to be in the Promise program. I've even had a parent call me and ask how to put their student in the Promise program. So yes, there's always challenges when trying to offer specialized support services to a specific population. But that's also another reason why we named it the Promise program, because before that, the students were walking around saying, oh, I'm one of Tori's homeless kids. And one, I don't feel like I'm old enough to have 30 children. And two, they were pretty much labeling themselves with stigma. So we were trying to find something that was more generic.
Thank you. So we're going to open it up to if folks have questions. So, you know, this is always kind of a little hard to navigate, but if you just, you can unmute yourself and then, you know, ask your question, and then just remember to mute yourself after you've asked your question. So the floor is open. Or alternatively, you can type your question in the chat box.
Hi, yeah, my name's Sarah, and I just had a question. Do you have a rubric or some type of, you know, you reference looking at their FAFSA and things like that when a student may be nominated by a counselor or something to that extent? What does the rubric or whatnot kind of contain when that kind of student is brought to your attention?
You mean for record keeping or for sharing information with the student?
So for, let's say a counselor says, I have this student I had a conversation with, or a teacher, you know, professor, I think they would be eligible for your program based on some of the conversations I had. But I'm sure there might be times that that comes up and you look into somebody and whatever that criteria is you have, they wouldn't qualify. What is that criteria?
So the straightforward pathway is, are you or were you in foster care and not reunited with your biological parents who you're living with? So that's one of the more clear-cut black and white. The unaccompanied homeless youth, not as clear-cut. So those cases are students who do not have access to their parents, whether it's because of a case of abandonment, abuse, have never lived with their parents, grew up with grandmom passed away, only grew up with one parent, unfortunately that parent's in prison, unfortunately living with one parent who's become addicted to drugs and lost the home, and then abandoned the child after. We've seen quite a few cases that lead to the student being unaccompanied. And unaccompanied is specifically referring to biological parents. So they could have an adult advocate in their life. I've had students who lived with their football coach from high school, who've been staying with a friend's family, who've actually lived with one of their teachers in high school, but not with their biological parents. And then homeless is lacking fixed, adequate nighttime residence. So we did have a student who was living on the couch of her older sister. Her older sister had a one-bedroom apartment in Northeast Philadelphia. Something, I unfortunately don't remember the case of what happened with mom, but mom was no longer in the picture for these two. I believe there was a younger sibling as well, and the sister started missing rent payments and was, you know, concerned that she would have to move out of the area, which would qualify because unfortunately that's not adequate fixed nighttime residence. We've also had some cases that are more black and white where students have come directly from the Coventry House or Family Promise Transitional Housing who are referred to me, but it's usually the doubled up ones who have a harder time stepping forward and saying, I think I qualify for this program, because they see homeless, they think, oh, I must be living under a bridge to qualify, but that is not the case. And then youth is under the age of 24. However, we have grandfathered students in the program who started, at 22 or 23 and are not going to graduate until 26. We're not going to remove them from services and support because they're now 25 or 26.
Just one more follow-up to that. So for that example, such as that person that was living with a sister, but obviously it wasn't consistent and wasn't adequate, did you find that information out simply from talking to the student?
Yeah, so as a financial aid administrator, I have the authority from the Department of Education to make an unaccompanied homeless youth determination for financial aid purposes, and therefore I've been given a dear colleague letter from Ed's office, as well as gone to trainings through our national association on how to ask those questions and what I'm looking for, which is why the advisory committee decided to make me the single point of contact, because if I was the one that had to collect all of that personal information and make the determination, and I was willing to do the other legwork, then it makes sense to only have to go to one person with that case. Other models I've seen is you go to the financial aid office makes the determination, then refers it to the single point of contact and says, yes, I got everything I need, the student qualifies.
Okay, thank you.
Victoria, we had a question in the chat about the foster youth, the new law that came out. And for folks on the call, I will definitely put in like kind of a notes recap, a link to this bill as well as information and contact to the field center. But if Tori, you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah, so it actually passed in the budget, so not really widely known. I feel like the most that's been done has not actually been directed at colleges. It's been directed at the public in general, which has been misleading article titles of foster youth go to college for free now. And unfortunately, that's not the case. When you read the legislation, it's Pennsylvania institutions are required to provide tuition and fee waivers after gift aid. So after you apply the Pell Grant and the state grant, whatever amount is left, students who are indicated that they are in foster care and qualify for the Chafee grant, but not necessarily are receiving the Chafee grant, which means in care at the age of 16, you should be waiving whatever gap there is for tuition fees starting fall 2020. I've been talking to FIA, the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, that manages both our state grant and the federal Chafee grant. And the challenge that we're having is, they said they're going to release a roster of the students for each institution that would qualify for this waiver. However, they're using the Chafee application to determine who's eligible, and the Chafee application usually doesn't come out until April, May, so they don't see these rosters being available until July. And I said, well, what about our incoming students? Our incoming students are told they have to make a decision by May 1st. That's the deposit deadline, and it's not fair to them, and honestly not a good practice, to not tell them that they qualify for this tuition and fee waiver until 2 months after the May 1st decision deadline. They said that was a very good point and they were going to look into it and get back to me. So I think really what happened was, everybody was a little caught off guard who wasn't part of writing this legislation, that it got passed so quickly. I was not, because it's not funded, and it's pretty easy ask to say make colleges do something to support foster youth that doesn't require any state tax dollars. But that means that there wasn't a whole lot of time to think about implementation, and I think that's where we're struggling with a little bit right now. So I am planning to create a fostering independence waiver application to just try to collect some of the information that was on prior year's Chafee applications. And you can find the Chafee application on FIA's website. It's fia.org, PHEAA.org. in hopes that I can try to identify the students earlier and then also help refer the students who think they qualified for Chafee to apply for Chafee, because that's another problem we've had. I've had students who qualify who don't get it because they had no idea there was a separate application, since it comes out so late in the recruitment cycle and financial aid cycle. So if you're not aware, that is a real thing that's supposed to be coming up this fall. Institutions are supposed to be waiving tuition fees after gift aid. And then the other part of the legislation is all colleges in Pennsylvania should have a single point of contact for foster youth to help navigate different resources, which includes benefits and off-campus support, which is honestly an area that I'm working on myself, since that was not something that we had mastered in the Promise program.
Thanks, Tori. Any other questions that folks have?
This is great. I mean, as you can all tell, Tori is clearly on the cutting edge and has become an expert in this. And, you know, when we happened upon this program, we said, hey, we really need to bring this to a wider audience. So I just want to thank you again, Tori. She's actually doing this from home on a sick day. So big time appreciation for you doing this for us. And I'm sure everyone else will agree that it was really valuable information. And, you know.
Yes, I apologize if you could tell that I am chewing gum, but I promise it was necessary.
I know.
And, thank you for the kind words. And if anybody does think of any questions in the future, feel free to email me directly.
Thank you so much. And we'll make sure that, you know, all this information, and once I clean up the recording a little bit and type up a few notes and pull some links with the foster youth bill, I'll send that out to everybody. Again, you know, feel free, you can direct questions to Tori, you can also email myself. And yeah, unless there's any other final comments or questions.
Well, I guess we can also do a couple more shameless plugs for other related things that are going on. And some of this will be, all of it will be in Caitlin's follow-up email. There is some kind of conference happening in March in Berks County related to supporting at-risk and first-gen students that we got through the Field Center here at Penn, which also does a lot of work and is partly responsible for this law around kids aging out of the foster system. That's the Field Center is also planning a conference in June that I think, I don't know, we're now on the planning committee for all of those single points of contact around the state. So all of the so there's about 20 some campuses that I think they've been working with more intensively, but then, you know, they want to do a training and get together for those 20 folks. And then they said, well, there's like 100 campuses around the state. We might as well do it for everybody. So when we get that information, we'll put it out. The other thing closer to home is that the annual FEND conference this year is going to be February 28th at Penn State Brandywine. The theme of the conference is housing, and so not necessarily specific to housing insecurity for college students, though that will kind of be a track in that we're going to have 2 workshops from the Hope Center for College Community and Justice at Temple University, doing workshops related to other models and resources and opportunities and just data and sort of, you know, information sharing around housing insecurity for college students. So I think that's it. There's always a lot going on, and we really appreciate the time you took to be with us today on this webinar.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, and we'll keep you abreast of our next webinar. Thanks.
Take care, everyone.